if you haven't bought one of these already, then you need to decide what type of music you want to make before you buy one, because it does make quite a difference. So let's talk about that. If you want to play English folk music, or you want to play for Morris dancing, or you like that kind of Morris dancing music, then I strongly recommend that you get the same as I have here, which is a DG Melodeon. Like I say, this row is D, this row is G, and a typical 8 bass button setup. This is by far the most common type of Melodeon, certainly in England, and you know, it's probably the most straightforward one to learn as far as I can tell. Obviously I've only learnt this type, so I'm obviously no authority on that, but reading between the lines and from all the research that I've made, I think I can say that is true. If you want to sing folk songs, then you're maybe better getting what we call a CF. Now that's the same idea completely, just drop down a little bit. So this row here, instead of D, would be a row of C in C major, and this row would be F. And you'll probably notice DG and CF, the relationship is the same between those two. So it's exactly the same thing moved down. You can also get B flat, E flat, and you can get A, D, and you can also get G, C, this one here, different colour. This is actually a G, C Melodeon, and it's one of the lowest pitch Melodeons you can get. So decide what you want to play first. If you're into Irish music, most people have what they call a BC. Now a BC is what it says on the tin. It's basically this row is B and this row is C, and taking that a stage further, if you like Irish and you like Scottish music, it's probably not a bad idea to invest in a 3-row B, C, C sharp. Now that means that this row is in the key of B, this row is in the key of C, this row is in the key of C sharp, be another row in there, so it's a bigger keyboard here. And generally those B, C, C sharp Melodeons have that Stradella bass that I showed you on the piano accordion. I'm told it's a fairly steep learning curve, but of course you've got every single note under the sun there, and I'll come back to the limitations of this type of Melodeon in a moment. Now when you're trawling through the internet trying to decide what to buy, you may see this word club crop up quite a lot. Club Melodeons, I would say to you, probably try and avoid, because they're not set up the same as the Melodeon I have here. The left hand is different, and you have one note in the middle that is tuned the same both ways. It's unisonoric, and you know, as I say, according to my research, they can be a bit of a nightmare, so I would steer clear of those. They tend to be the older type of Melodeon, and may not be in particularly great condition unless they've been restored. So I would, if you're not sure, I would steer clear and get a straightforward DG. The good thing about learning the DG Melodeon is once you've learnt a tune on it, if you buy a Melodeon in a different key, like I showed you my GC, just play the same buttons and you've got the same tune just transposed into a different key. So you can apply everything you've learnt on the DG to other keys, as long as you haven't got more rows, as long as all the tuning is set up the same. So that's a really good thing about that. Obviously you can't apply it if you learn something on the DG and you buy a BC, obviously B and C are only a semitone apart, you can't apply that to that. That's a different way of learning. So you know, I would strongly recommend, if you do get more than one Melodeon, you know, get the same type, you know, a D, G, or a B flat, E flat, or a C, F. You see what I mean? That interval of a fourth between the two rows. Maintain that interval, and you shouldn't have too much trouble. You may see this word wet crop up quite a lot when you're looking at Melodeons, and this Melodeon here is what's known as wet. Now that means that in the case of this Melodeon, each note on the right hand has got 2 reeds, and those reeds are not tuned exactly the same. If you listen, you'll hear a beating. If I come down here, it's more obvious. And what it actually means is that one reed has been tuned perfectly in concert pitch, and the other reed that's making the same note is tuned very slightly sharp to it or flat to it. And what that does, it sets up that beating, and it kind of fattens the sound out. And it's very, very obvious on the low note. If a melodeon is tuned dry, it means that all the reeds are tuned exactly the same. If you like Scottish music, you'll go for a wet melodeon where the reeds are tuned quite a fair bit apart to really fatten up the sound. And if you like English music or French music, you'll probably go for a drier tuning. But that's what wet and dry means in the world of melodeon, and you do want to make sure that you get the right type, because if you don't like that wet sound, it can grate a bit, and the wetter it is, the more it grates if you don't like it. So I would strongly recommend, listen to lots of melodeon videos and audio files before you buy one to decide what you actually like. I thought at first when I bought mine that I really loved the very wet sound of the Scottish melodeons. Actually, I'm not so sure I do now, and this is probably as wet as I'd want to get. And probably my next melodeon I'll go for something a bit drier. Now, some melodeons only have one reed per note, and so they are said to have one voice per note. And what that gives you is a kind of a concertina sound. It's quite a thin sound, quite nice, but quite a thin sound. Obviously, if there's only one reed per note, it can't be tuned wet, because obviously wet means that two reeds have been tuned slightly differently from one another. So when we talk about the voices of a melodeon, it's how many reeds there are per note. So on my melodeon, which is a Hona Erica, by the way, and it's not new, it's a sort of 1990s one, there are two reeds per note, two voices. It's a two voice, okay? So that means that's how it's been tuned wet. You can get 3 voice, 4 voice, but bear in mind, the more voices, the more hardware inside and the heavier it gets. The lovely thing about this melodeon is it's really light. Lovely, and I pick it up and practically throw it through the ceiling, it's so light. If you've got a melodeon, it's got loads of reed blocks inside, lots of toys if you like, it makes it heavier the more rows you've got, and it gets heavier and heavier. So, if you're physically not a very strong person, probably go for something like this to start with, because they can get quite heavy. Some melodeons have stops on top. This one doesn't, but a stop is a kind of a bit like on an organ where you push the stops in and out. What the stops do is they literally stop some reeds from sounding. If you listen to this, this is a chord. This is a chord. And a chord is 3 notes. Okay, in a major chord it's the 1st, 3rd and 5th. Okay, and what a stop will do on the bass side very often is it will take out the 3rd, and you might say, well, what's the point of that? Well, the point is, if you take the stop out of a major chord or a minor chord, it becomes neither major nor minor, or if you like, becomes both. And that's useful if you're playing minor runs on the right hand and you want a minor chord to go with it, you don't have that chord, then taking the 3rd out will mean that you can do that. Otherwise you'll get a horrible clash between major and minor. I'll deal with it a bit more of that when I sort of do some sort of tutorial videos, but basically if you can get a melodeon that's got a stop on the bass side, and it's literally a button you push up and down, takes the 3rd out, that can be very useful. Stops on the treble side, on the right hand side, often take out or add in extra reeds to give you lower octaves or higher octaves. It's not like life and death. As I say, this melodeon doesn't have any stops at all, and I'm perfectly happy with it at the moment. I've got my two voices, my 2 reeds per note, and this side I can't take the 3rd out. But in the early stages you probably won't need to, because you'll be so busy learning the basic tunes that you'll want to get started. You won't worry about that. It's when you start developing you may want to do that.